Hey, it's Drybear. We are heading into the second opening weekend of Baldur's Gate 3. And to celebrate all the excitement and success of the game, Larian has put out information on the stats and choices that players have been making. So if you're wondering what races, classes, and decisions are the most popular across all the 800,000 CCU on the game right now, then you're about to find out. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you don't come hang out with me in the community, the next time you're making a homemade pizza, and when the timer goes off to go check out the homemade pizza you've been making, you're gonna be a couple minutes early from the cook level that you want on the pizza, and you're gonna have to stand there waiting. And this is pretty interesting because there's a large sample size of players to look at, and so we kind of see where the choices are going. Now keep in mind that this is probably for the almost 99.5% of everyone that is playing the game. This is gonna be their first playthrough. And I'm guessing that a lot of this will change once people go into their second and third playthroughs, and they'll make different choices. But I think a lot of people like their first playthrough to be kind of straightforward, experience the story, explore the world, and that sort of thing. But here are the choices for races in the opening weekend of Baldur's Gate 3. Half-elf, unsurprisingly, almost always is the most popular in these type of games. Some people like the fantasy of elf, and they have the relation, like they can relate to a human because they are human. And sometimes having a little bit of both makes it a little bit more interesting when they're playing it, but it's a little more relatable than just playing a full elf. And so half-elf typically is one of the most popular races in these sorts of games. So unsurprisingly there. And then for the same reasons, human and elf are the next two most popular. The next cohort or clumping of data, I would say, is going to be Dragonborn, Tiefling, and Drow. And these are your humanoid, but kind of a very heavily fantasy leaning. Dragonborn kind of coming out ahead on Tiefling and Drow and showing that it's very unique. I love all the colors and presentations that you can get for Dragonborn. I think they did an awesome job doing a dragon humanoid race. It looks awesome. It's very cool. Tiefling, the devil style, especially if you're playing like a warlock or any kind of evil aspect. I think having the devil mixture into your blood makes a really fun playthrough, and there's a lot of really interesting options that come from that as well. And then Drow, because Drow, not only, especially if you're playing an evil playthrough, you're going to have plenty of reactivity throughout your story. People will react to seeing a Drow, and you can do evil things, and people will understand it's because you're a Drow. And you also get some really interesting options for dark vision and other proficiencies that other classes and races may not get access to. And it's a pretty steep drop off after that. Half-orc coming out ahead of the lower end of the pack. Kind of unsurprising for that specifically, just because I think a lot of people that want to play a barbarian or a big fat paladin, half-orc fits that perfectly. They also do great with critical strikes, and they have the cheat death mechanic, which is excellent for just going all in. And I think if you're, if you're cool with the lower fangs and all that and the look of it, I think the half-orcs look really cool. So that's kind of a pickup there. Then towards the very bottom are the very unpopular races. A lot of these are the kind of humanoid-esque, but definitely much shorter. And this could possibly be a cutscene thing. I think in general, dwarves, gnomes, halflings tend to be less popular than some of the more relatable races. But it also could just be if you know that you're going to be romancing or things like that. Maybe you wanted it to be as close to people maybe making themselves in that, and they want to do that. I think there's some really cool bonuses. Deep gnomes, dwergars, and even the gold dwarves, halflings, like the Strongheart halflings. A lot of them have very powerful effects and can make some of the best classes possible. But I guess just popularity-wise, just not going to be there. And this one shocked me because my first playthrough was Githyanki. I made my first playthrough pure Githyanki. I was a Githyanki. I romanced Lae'zel, and I followed through all the way to the end with a Githyanki playthrough, and I got a Githyanki ending. So all of that was really cool and very exciting, but for some reason, Githyanki was the least popular. They're honestly one of the most flexible races too, because they get Misty Step very easily, just part of their character, and Misty Step is one of the most powerful spells or abilities in the entire game. When it comes to class choices, it was a lot more even kilter. Now, Paladin did stand out on the top. I think a lot of people really like Paladin. Plus, Paladin is just, not only do they do great damage, they can also off heal or main heal. Their lay on hands is incredibly powerful for healing output, and you can subclass them into almost anything that you want. They're also a charisma focused if you use them as an ability modifier and caster, which means they can do dialogue for your class. Actually, all three of the top picked classes, Sorcerer, Paladin, and Warlock, are charisma focused. Paladin can be strength focused, but can also be charisma. So you can actually do that and then be the main focus. And I think a lot of people, especially for their first playthrough, like doing the dialogue on their character, just so that they can be the ones making the choices and going through and experiencing the world. So that's kind of cool. But I think also just Paladin, Warlock, Sorcerer tend to be very popular archetypes that people really like. So I think that kind of goes double. Paladin is well above everybody else, kind of surprisingly higher. Usually these are a lot more even when it comes to choices on that front. But maybe it could also just be with the companions that you get, right? You already get a cleric with Shadowheart. You can get a druid with Halsin or Jaheira. You can get a wizard with Gale. You can get a fighter with Lae'zel. And of course, you can respect them. Barbarian comes from Karlach. But you can also get Will with a warlock and Astarion with a rogue. But on that front, people just really like being a paladin. There's plenty of choices. You can do, armor paladin, you can be damage paladin, you can be support paladin, you can even be evil paladin, and I think that kind of lends itself to a lot of really interesting playstyles for people. I actually honestly would have thought that fighter would be at the top here, but they're more average this time around. Sorcerer second and Warlock third. I think this makes sense. Sorcerer's super powerful, and they have some really interesting choices, and maybe people just are kind of put off by the 8 schools of magic that Wizard can do from the start, and the fact that Wizard is intelligence focused instead of charisma, which means that they can't do the story progress. They can't do the dialogue successfully when compared to a sorcerer if they're not focusing on charisma. Rogue, Bard, and Barbarian are about the same here in the second clump. Pretty surprising that Bard is as high as it is. Bard is insanely broken. They are one of the most powerful classes in the entire game by far. But typically, bards tend to not be as popular. They're kind of, not mass appeal for some reason. Maybe people just don't like the music aspect or that sort of thing. But in this game, they are rocking it. They're above the halfway point, which is pretty cool. Fighter, Ranger, and Wizard are kind of in that middle ground, surprisingly. Usually, Fighter and Ranger are way up at the top for popularity. So I'm wondering why we're not getting too much from that. Now, Minsk is a Ranger, but he's hard to unlock, and you only unlock him at the end of the game. So it could just be that, people just don't want to play Ranger, or they're subclassing. This is most likely the starting class choice, not the subclass choice for that main reason. And then Wizard, kind of come towards the bottom. Monk is much more popular than I thought it would be. I expected Monk and Bard to be at the bottom of this list for the starting class, but Monk actually in the bottom 3 and well above Cleric and slightly above Druid, which is pretty cool. Druid kind of up there as well. I think a lot of people like the shapes, and the Spore Druid was a nice last-minute addition that makes that class super fun and interesting. And then Cleric kind of down at the bottom. I think people are just subclassing into Cleric, not choosing it as a main. And also, one of the first companions that you encounter and unlock is a base Trickery Cleric with Shadowheart, so it could just be that people just don't have interest in that, or it could just be a multi-classing thing. Now, the vast majority of people made their own custom characters. Almost 94% of people made their own custom characters, and some people made the origin characters. And this is for the people that just, maybe they want to have a story played out for them, and they want to play that story out and twist and turn. And honestly, all of these characters have very interesting stories that develop over time. You meet sub-characters for them based on their past and history. I've gone through most of these already and kind of explored some of them on what you can do, and it changes the main story. They all have things that link back to it. So these origin characters are very well fleshed out. So if you're playing an origin character, enjoy. There's a lot of really cool choices you can make as a pure origin character. But of the people that did decide to play an origin character their first way through, Gale was the most popular. Karlach and Astarion were the second most, down to Shadowheart and Will, and then lastly, Lae'zel. Surprisingly, Lae'zel is not that popular in general, even as a companion choice, a romance choice, or even just as a choice as the origin character either. People just don't relate to the Githyanki aliens, I guess. In terms of diplomacy, this is not as clean cut as I thought it was going to be. So in Act 1, there is a location that you will be given the option to either protect, save, be neutral on, destroy, or be horribly evil about. So you kind of have these ranges, and there's actually choices between all of those. I'm not going to spoil each individual one, but there are choices, and there's a granulated scale on how evil or good you can be on how you do that. So you have those choices to make in that. But in those choices, 65.1% of the people were good, and they protected innocents. and 34.9% of the people were either mostly evil or completely horrible, which is an option. There's actually 2 different outcomes that can come from that as well. So I thought that this was going to be more closer to like 75, 80% good and 20% evil, but no, there's a little bit more destruction coming in on that first playthrough for a lot of people. Scratch has been petted over 750,000 times. So Scratch is a dog you can pick up in the story in Act 1. If you do the right things, he will show up in your camp and give you items, and you get the chance to pet him all the time. And it has cemented his reputation as the goodest boy in all of Faerun. So he has been petted 750,000 times. I think we should pump these numbers up, to be honest. Players spoke to over 1,400,000 corpses using Speak to the Dead, and over 2,400,000 animals. So speaking to animals has been used quite a lot. I have yet to do an animal speaking playthrough. I want to do it on a ranger or a druid personally, but there is that. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And players have played for at least 10 million hours or over 1,225 years. So a lot of playtime in a single week. Only 368 players managed to finish the game in the opening weekend, and I'm guessing I'm one of these because I definitely did. It took some long streams and a lot of extra effort, but either I just barely missed this or I got into it, but it was, that's crazy. So hopefully you guys are not doing what I did. Enjoy the story, look under every stone, look behind every tree, and enjoy it. But, you know, obviously my job revolves around it. So I wanted to make sure I had at least some progress on that. So only 368 people finished the game in the opening weekend, which is pretty impressive because the game is at least minimum 60 hours long. Over 93% of players rolled a custom character. So there's that stat I mentioned earlier. Only 7% of people playing Origin, which is perfectly fine. Both are great choices. It depends on whether you want to use someone else's story or make your own. Both are great. Players spent a combined 88 years in character creation. It is kind of scary that they decided to track this because this is kind of like the first major boss of the game is making your character in Baldur's Gate 3. And nearly 10% of characters spent at least an hour in character creation, which means that the characters that were created, 10% of them spent minimum an hour making their character, which is wild. Of the Origin characters selected, we had this kind of showed earlier. Gale was the most popular. We get it, who could resist the lure of that head of hair. And then the 7th, Gale was the 7th cause of death for players, but only have yourselves to blame for being so flammable. So kind of friendly fire killing coming from wizard spell choices. These are the class and race choices as we looked at earlier. Almost 100,000 players have been rejected by Astarion, and we're all trying hard not to take it personally. So Astarion's kind of a mysterious character, and you can do a lot of things wrong. And if you take certain steps, he will leave permanently without any dialogue or choices, and if you try to romance him, it can fail pretty horribly as well. So he's quite a complicated character. It seems like a lot of people tried, and 100,000 people have been rejected by him. One NPC was shoved into a chasm for every concurrent player we had during our peak. On Sunday, 815,000 NPCs have fallen to their death, and of all player deaths, 12% were caused by friendly fire. And in terms of diplomacy, players were good. We saw this already. Assaulted the Grove, Scratch has been scratched, and then 10 million hours played. So there you go. Those are the stats. Super cool, super fun. Some of these really surprised me on the outcome, but let me know what your experience is, where you land on your first playthrough, and how much you're enjoying the game down below. If you found value in the video, leave a like, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And I'll see you on my live stream. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.